Hey everyone, Chip here. Been a while since I posted anything, and I came up with this brand new multi-shader. It's a multi-material shader, and I think it's pretty cool. I want to share it with you. So if you look at this scene right here, you see we have this wall that's seen its better days, and a concrete floor, and some old broken down wooden items. And then we've got, of course, the bed in the middle with a sheet and a pillow and a blanket. And I use the same material for the wall, the wood, and the floor. And I want to show you how I did that. And it's going to be part of the EEVEE material systems, or if you're on my Patreon, you get it for $1. I'll share it there as well as I'll share this scene. So let's walk around it. Right now I'm in EEVEE, but this will render really nicely in Cycles or even K-Cycles, which no one has ever heard about yet. It's a new product that's pretty exciting, and I'll talk about it at the end of this video. So let's jump in this scene, and you can see as we move around, you'll start to see, see what some of these textures are looking like. There's a little bit of a bump right here around this area, and we can make that more pronounced. And we have kind of distressed wood, and notice that the dirt comes up from the ground. And we also have this volumetric effect too that I'm going to show you how we do that and how you set that up. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and open up a blank file, and this is kind of what that looks like just getting started. Let's take a look at this and see what we have here. So basically this is just a cube, and in that cube we have a solidify, and that solidify gives us this wall thickness right here. You can see the wall thickness in the door there. We also have a cube, this cube, which is basically cutting the hole for the door, and that's it for the room, frankly. And if we look inside the room we have a couple chairs, the bed, a table, a blanket, and this kind of tall cabinet over here, and that's really it. And that's all we're going to be working with today. So what we want to do is we want to texture this, and before I texture it, I want to actually get it so that it's lit correctly. So here's my camera view, and if I go into EEVEE, let's go into EEVEE and look at that, and you'll see that in EEVEE, we're just getting the light pumping right through. I've got this sun right here, and as you can see, it's out here somewhere, and it's shining through the doorway. And if I go into Cycles, and we'll see, let's make this set this to 32. By the way, I'm using K-Cycles, which is a different version of Blender. Well, like I say, we'll talk about that, but it's really, really fast, blindingly fast, and it's compatible with everything. So something that Eric Klein's been working on, who's a buddy of mine who I've known for a couple years now. He's probably the most brilliant interior rendering guy out there, and he knows so much about rendering in Blender, both Cycles and EEVEE. So anyway, so here's our scene, and you can see in Cycles, which is a path tracer, we're bouncing some light around, but in EEVEE, we're not, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to add this area fill. I want to add that, and let me show you where that goes. So that's this light right here. So here's the area fill. If you can see, that's this light. That's what the area fill is, facing in, and it's set to, I don't know, 125 watts. It's a little bit yellowish. And when I add that, now we're starting to bounce light around a little better, but it's not great. And so what I want to do is I'm going to go into my wireframe, and let's go to the top view. And here is our area, and I'm going to say in Gaffer Shift A, let's go ahead and we're going to add a light probe and a radiance volume. And let's just move that kind of to the center here, and I'm going to scale it up something like this, and then move it out something like that. And that's the Y direction. Let's go in here and let's add, instead of the Y, let's give it 2 more, so that maybe 3 more. So these are kind of squarish, right? And then we can look at this view, and let's move it here. And we want to get these probes so they're actually inside, a little inside. So these are light probes, and what's great about these is they will help bounce the light around, and they'll also help bounce color around inside the room. So let's go back to our view. Let's go back here, and we can see that nothing's happened yet. And so what I'm going to do to make sure that I get something to happen is I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to say bake in direct lighting, and it'll go fairly quickly. And now you can see, wow. I'm not going to worry too much about it right now, because we're going to be changing the materials on this. So now that we have this bouncing around well, and let's go ahead and show you what it looks like in cycles as well. There we go. So it goes pretty, so that's in cycles. And then, of course, EEVEE will be what we're working with. Let's go ahead and create a little bit of a darker material to work with. I'll just come in here, say new. I'm going to call this gray. And we'll make the base color something like this. Yeah, that looks a little better. And then I can assign that to everything else in the scene fairly easily by selecting A and then shift selecting the cube last. And we will copy material to selected, which is the same thing over here. Copy material to selected. So now everything is gray. And if I do a bake in direct lighting again, you'll see that it'll actually adjust the lighting one more time. So there we have it. So that's a little better. Now what I want to do is I'm going to go back into our top view and let's go into our wireframe. And I want to add a reflection cube map. And I'm going to move that right here to the 0 spot. Let's set it to be a box. And I will make sure that it also is set up correctly so that this inside box is inside the room and the outside box is outside the room. And I think we're in pretty good shape there. Now we'll go back in and I set this to a shortcut key, bake in direct lighting, but that also bakes the cube map. And that reflection map is just going to give us a little better reflections if we need it. If we want to have a perfect reflection on the floor, we'll put a reflection plane in there, but I'm not going to do that because I don't think that our surface is not going to be that reflective. So we'll just leave that there as it is. So I'll go back to this view and let's look at it. And you can see that we're about ready to get started adding materials. So I'm going to select this cube, which is called box, and I'm going to use this new multi-texture fast and using KitOps, and I will add that. And you can see it comes in pretty much set up the way we want. But let's just say we want to change that. And how do we do that? I'll go to something like CCO textures. There's a couple places online you can get free textures, but you can just go in here and go into the assets. And so I might just come in here and type in brick, and I'll get all these different bricks. And maybe I want, let's grab this one. And I can download that by just clicking here on the 2JPEG. And that will download basically all the different maps, including a roughness map and a diffuse map and a normal map. And here are the maps. And this is actually what we want, is we kind of want this 2K brick map right here. That's what we're going to use. So let's go ahead and show how we would change that. So I'm going to go back into Blender. And if you look at the materials that we've added, the multi-texture fast material, hit the home button. We'll actually always recenter it. You've got these nodes here. We have the mask node, the top material, and the bottom material. Over here is our scale and location for the mask. The top material, we have a scale. Bottom material, we have a scale. We have this hue, saturation, and value that we can adjust for either one of these materials. And then we have the mix controls, which basically is the bump for the mask, the roughness for the top material, the bump for the top material, the roughness for the bottom material, and the bump for the bottom material. And then we have this dirty node, which allows us to add all kinds of dirt. And I'm going to explain that here in just a second, but I just want to kind of give you a picture of what's going on here. And I'm going to move it up a little bit so you can see these tiles. So we have this mask up here, and the mask is a black and white image. And let me show you what that looks like. There's the mask. And so you can see that that's the black, that's a 4K image. It's just black and white. It's a ping. It basically is a way of figuring out what's going to be in front and what's going to be in back. Back to our shader editor. Now, if I adjust the scale of the mask, you can see it changes things quite a bit. And I can actually move things around and get things to where, kind of where I want them. Now let's look at these other tiles. We have a top material, and I'm going to change actually the bottom material. So I'll go in here, hit the X button and say open, and I'm going to go into my downloads and that bricks, and I'll select that brick pattern, open image, and you see it jumps right in there, right? And I can adjust the scale of that brick if I want, and adjust the value of it. So if I want to make it a little darker, I can do this. But I'm going to leave it alone at 1. Once I've got that set up, now I'm going to go in and I want to adjust this relief area right here. So I go into my mix controls, and the mask bump, as you can see, as I drag that out, it's actually accentuating this bump area. And you can see that's what it's done. And then I want the roughness value for the bottom. You can see if I drag it down, it's going to be shiny, and I'll just drag it out just a little bit. And then the bottom bump this is the bump for the actual brick itself. So I can adjust this as well. So I can just punch it just a little bit, and we'll leave it about there. So that looks good. Another thing we might want to do is we may want to take that top surface, and that top surface we're using a plaster. It's the same kind of thing that we're doing. And typically when I do these, a lot of times I'll just turn off this dirty node, and that's just hit the M key to mute it. And when you turn it off, you start to see, you know, all the different patterns that are showing up. So if I go in here now on the top material, you'll see that there's a pretty good pattern here. So I'm going to just adjust the scale down so that we don't have quite the strong pattern. That looks a lot better. I can also adjust the value. Let's give it a 2. Let's just pump the value up so it's a little bit brighter. And let's take the saturation of the bricks down a little bit so it's not quite as bright. Maybe 0.5 or something around there. There we go, something like that. That might be good. Notice it's on the floor. We're going to fix that here in just a sec. So once we have this set, let's go ahead and let's look at this dirty node a little better. I'm going to hit the M key, M as in mother, to turn that back on. And I'm going to set this to 0. So this is basically the way it was, right? And we have no dirt. And I'll set this to 0 and this to 0. And so the first thing I'll do is, you know, the color is going to be brown or black. Let's just go ahead and create a brown color, something like that. Maybe move saturation down a little bit. So, okay, that's going to be our dirt color. And then our amount, we can start adding amount, right? So here's a lot. You can see as we start adding it, and we may want to change the scale. If the scale's like this, it's more of a pattern. So we want to adjust the scale probably under 1, something so that it looks fairly random, and that works pretty good like that. So that's too much dirt, so I'm going to back off the dirt just a little bit. And now I'm going to add AO. Now watch when I start adding AO. Look what happens. It basically puts ambient occlusion in there, so you can see it getting darker. I'm going to just add a touch of AO because dirt tends to settle in the edges in the corner. So I add just a touch of AO. And then height. Check this when I add height. So when I add height, you can see that it's starting to go up from the ground all the way up to the ceiling. So I'm going to just put a little bit down at the bottom of the floor. And now I've added dirt on that. And we've got a multi-texture fasten. That looks really pretty good. So I'll go back in here and I'll say bake in direct lighting one more time so we can take a look at this and see what that looks like. And it's actually looking pretty good. And we'll go into cycles and we'll take a quick look at it in cycles and see if it's rendering. It looks pretty good there. Now we want to do the floor next. Okay, before I do the floor, I think I'm going to adjust this dirt just a little bit less. It seems like there's a little too much, so I'll just say 0.05. Let's try that. See what that looks like. And I'll go into EEVEE 2. Yeah, I like that a little better. I think that's not quite as dirty. Yeah, maybe just a tad bit more. 0.07. Okay, there. Let's leave it like that. Okay, now we're going to go into the floor. So we'll select our box, and I'm going to tab into it. And let's go here, and let's select the bottom face of that. There it is. It's selected. And with that selected, I'm going to go in to my material editor, and I'm going to add a new slot, and I'm going to set that to multi-texture fast also, and then I'm going to assign it. So go back to this view, we'll see nothing has changed. With this selected, I'm going to hit this duplicate button right here, and I'm going to call this concrete floor. And so now I have a new shader, and we can see, I'm going to go ahead and first thing I'm going to do is mute that so that we don't see that. Get out of edit mode so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so now that we're on the concrete floor, turned off the dirty node group, and let's go ahead and let's grab a top material. And in this case, I'm going to cancel this out and say open, and I'll go into some textures I have. You can actually download these as well from textures.com or somewhere like that. But I'll go in here and I'll try and find a texture that I might like, say something like this, and drop that in there, and let's make sure that its scale looks about right so I can see these little squares in there. So that's good. So we'll leave that like that, and then I'm going to go and I need another concrete texture for the bottom, and so I'll turn this off, say open, let's go back into concrete. I'm going to get a different texture here. Let's try something like kind of crazy like this, see what that does. Oh, that's the top. Oh, that's all right. We'll just, there's the first one. Let's go to the bottom, and there's the bottom one, and you can see how that works. Now this time I'm going to use a different mask. Now I'll go in here and I have this grunge mask, and I'm going to add that, and you can see it mixes both of those pretty well. The bump is just way too strong, so I'm going to go into the mix controls and I'm going to turn the mask bump all the way off so I don't have any mask bump. And then the top roughness, I'm going to make that, bring it down a little bit so it's got just a tiny bit of shine to it. And the top bump is fine. And the bottom roughness, I'm going to do the same. Just bring it down so I can get a little bit, just a tiny little bit of shine. And the bottom bump, I think I'll leave it as well. And let's look at that. And that's going to be our concrete floor. The only thing is we may want it to have it darker. So if I take the value here, let's make this one 0.5. There we go. And this one 0.5. And now they're both darker, but because they're darker and because we're using a single texture to drive the roughness and the bump values, I'll need to go back in now and adjust those. So I'll adjust the top roughness and I'll move that up a little bit, and the bottom roughness up a little bit too. So now I've got quite a unique floor, as you can see. I've mixed these two textures, and let's go and adjust the scale of this bottom one. Here we go, so we don't have too much tiling going on. And with that all done, let's go ahead now and turn on the dirty node. M for mute toggles. And what I'll do is I'm going to take the height down to 0, and the AO, I'm going to leave that alone so we can see that over here. And I think as I look at this, I still want that concrete just a little darker. So I'm going to go over here to the value again. We got kind of a nice looking concrete. So that's how we were able to take this new multi-material and mix something and create a very, very nice surface material. Okay, now let's use the exact same process to create a multi-wood material. So I'm going to select this cabinet back here. I'm going to choose multi-texture fast, and over here I'll again hit this duplicate, and I'm going to call this multi-wood. Now I'll go into the base material, go to my wood tile, and I want to grab this. I'll go to the bottom material, and I'm going to grab this one. And then I'm going to go back up to my mask, and just as we did earlier with the concrete, I'll set it to grunge. And of course our bump is way too high. And let's go back in here, and I'm going to adjust the mask bump to 0 because I don't want the mask bump to show anything. And I will make the top bump, let's zoom in here, look at that. Yeah, that's not bad. Let's change the value to 1 there for that. And I'm going to zoom over here, mute this so I can see what we're working with. Actually, I'm going to go back into my mask and go back to the Adobe mask and make sure I get my scales correct. That looks pretty good. And that looks pretty good. Then I'll go back here and add that grunge. So that adds kind of a dirt. So again, we're getting a really nice mixture between the two materials. I'm gonna adjust the saturation there, and we're in pretty good shape. So next thing I want to do is I'm going to look at this object close up, and I want to look at the bumpy texture. Pretty good, actually. With that done, I'm going to zoom out, and I'll just select these objects and copy material to selected. Again, that's the same as this button right there, and copy material to selected. Now let's add a little bit of dirt, something like that, and then I'll actually move it up just a little bit, and that's going to be our wood. So now let's finish the scene with some EEVEE materials, and they typically work pretty well in cycles as well. So I'm going to select this bed object right here, and I'm going to add the material, which is this carpet material. Hit the home key, and let's go in here, and I'm going to turn this to off, and we'll give this a kind of a bright green. Then we'll adjust the scale for. Okay, we'll set that there, and that looks pretty good. And then we'll go grab this, and I'm going to tab into here and hit the L key and the L key, and now we're just going to use add the insert, delete the insert, tab in here, and now I have that leather material already in here, so I can turn that to leather light and assign, tab out, and you can see that the leather light is way too strong. So we're going to again go into leather light. I'm going to adjust the saturation now in the wood just to kind of punch it out. And we adjusted the scale a little bit on the walls here. And I think we're about ready to finish the rendering. Okay, so let's add our volumetric lighting first. So I'll go 5, turn off perspective, go into wireframe, Shift A, give a cube. Let's kind of center this in the room. That's good. And let's give it a new material. I'm going to call this volumetric effect. X, delete that. Shift A, we'll do a shader, and we'll do the principal volume. Drop it in here, and we hook that up to the volume like so, and set the density to something like 0.0. Let's try that. 4, 0. Yeah, that actually works pretty good. You can see that we're in pretty good shape with that. Let's hit the Q button and bake in direct lighting again. See what that does. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So that's our EEVEE render, and I'm going to save that. And then we'll go in, and next we'll look at our cycles render. And that's what that looks like. It looks pretty good. And the cycles, it looks like the floor is a little bit too reflective. Notice that it's different in cycles from EEVEE. So let's go back into our floor object, and we'll adjust it. And we'll go back into cycles, and we'll take another look at it. Yeah, I think that looks a little better. So, and that's going to do it for now. I think that that kind of shows you how easy it is to use this new multi-material shader and combine different textures to create different surfaces. So one other thing I'll talk to you about, and that is this version of Blender I'm using, which is called K-Cycles. This can render about 2 to 3 times faster than regular cycles. Everything else is pretty much the same as Blender. One of the cool things about K-Cycles is it's got these presets, and these presets automatically generate optimized settings. You know how difficult it is to figure out all these different settings? Well, these presets will generate that for you. So it's one of the nicer things about K-Cycles is it's intelligent and how it automatically picks the right settings for you for cycles. All you have to do is go into one of these presets and choose the one that you want, and it'll work for you. So Stay tuned for more on K-Cycles. It's going to be released here fairly soon, and the pricing is going to be amazing. You're not going to believe how affordable it is. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys online.